Good morning, or should I say good evening, if you're down under. Here I am again. I'm making a habit of this, marching around with the dogs in the woods this time. And I just thought I'd come on for a little brief live to tell you that I never did get that email back from Professor Pollitt that I was promised. Just to recap for those of you who missed the live on Friday, I think it was Friday, just to recap, I paid £75 to go to a webinar on Thursday evening with Professor Pollitt. It was the first in a series of 8 webinars. And the reason I paid to go and see it was because it was a myth-busting webinar. Now, I was intrigued, a myth-busting webinar on laminitis, and I was intrigued to go, to listen as to what the myth-busting was going to be about. Well, there was no myth-busting. It was a history tour, I suppose, webinar 1, a history tour of Pollitt's life, or at least his later life. I'm going to go arse over tit in a minute on these brain balls, as they say. It was a history tour of his later life. Later, as in how he got into research, and he got into it in his 40s, and he admitted at the time that he felt a bit of a fraud amongst all of these other scientists. However, he went on to look at the histology and the inside of the hoof in such great detail, far more detail than anybody had ever done before. It was quite amazing with the technology and imaging that he had at the time. So he went on to do that. I'm just going to pause by this log. And, but also he got a lot of funding to research laminitis. And so he built the laminitis research unit in Queensland in Australia. And they proceeded over a number of years, couple of decades, to research laminitis. Now, at that time, they had decided to research laminitis in terms of a metabolic dysfunction. They believed that the reason that the laminae failed, and then once it had failed, P3 was not suspended anymore in the capsule. And so it ended up rotating or sinking or both catastrophically. And if the horse wasn't put on box rest on a deep bed, if the horse was moved, if the horse wasn't given drugs, whether it had metabolic markers or not, so they'd take bloods initially to find out if it did. And if it didn't, well, they'd scratch their heads as to why the laminae failed, and they couldn't understand that. If it was a fat pony or a fat horse, well, and it had metabolic markers, even those that weren't fat that had metabolic markers, then that was great because that fitted the model. But those that didn't fit the model, oh well, it still did the same thing. Sometimes heart bar shoes were used. Latterly now, we've got into composites, dim material. It's not changed. The road down, or the road those animals go on when they are diagnosed with laminitis is not a pretty one. So when Pollitt got into doing more research, he started looking at the cells of the foot, how various things affected those cells. He was looking at insulin. He was looking at glucose. They were taking horses in and they were overdosing them initially with far, way over natural overdoses with a substance called oligofructose. They had tried black walnut extract in the past, basically to poison the animal. And then they would put the animal to sleep, chop off a leg or two, and usually it was a front leg, never a hind leg. And they would then look at the cells inside. Now, I've spoken about this on lives many times. And these research papers you can go and find, because you can find them under places like ResearchGate. You can go in and you can find those. And during all of those experiments, the idea was that they were looking to see if they could find a drug that would stop the laminae separating. But all the way through, and you can go and have a look yourself and go and download the majority of these papers, and not just Pollitt's. You can download the Carmelts. You could they're called the Carmelts, Carmalts. Von Epps. You can download. There's many of them. There's many researchers that have looked into laminitis over the years now, and following a very similar model to the one that Pollitt proposed. But at no point did they spend the time to properly look at one incredibly big variable. And that variable was the hoof capsule and what was happening to it. Now, you have to remember, in Pollitt's experiments, he got these horses from slaughterhouses, usually from knockoffs from the or end of line from the racing industry. No longer wanted, no longer used, going to their death. But apparently, according to Professor Chris Pollitt, who shod his horses himself, these feet were healthy. Those were his words in his papers. We didn't see the feet. We didn't have any measurements, critical measurements of the feet at all. We didn't have any x-rays of the feet. Now, at times, I know x-rays were taken, but they were rarely ever shown. We didn't have any sequential photographs. You know, you go and choose this animal from the slaughterhouse and you say, let's have a look. Oh, they look healthy. I'd like to see what your version of healthy is, because if you're shoeing horses because they can't cope, because you need to do endurance, this is what he was telling us in his history lesson, and something's going wrong with those horses' feet, because you're not going to wear them off. Let me, or somebody show me the bloody nubs that are all over Facebook and the internet with horses wearing their feet off. No, the truth of the matter is, if a horse needs to be shod, and this is the truth, it is because the trim before the shoes is causing that horse some grief. And it's very, very easy to do, because it's very easy to send a horse off balance, off the wrong plane. So these horses were chosen, and Chris Pollitt said they were healthy. That's all you needed to know. You didn't need to know any more. They were just healthy. And then they were put into the experiment, but not all at once. They weren't all experimented on at once. And by experiment, I mean filled up with oligofructose, the ones that they were looking at in terms of the damage to the laminae or lamellae, as he calls them. They have several different names, meaning the same thing. And they took these horses, but they didn't take them all at once. They fed them into the experiment 3 at a time, and having controls as well. They fed them into the experiment 3 at a time. Meanwhile, the other horses who were hanging around waiting to go into their experiment for weeks on end were had to wait until they were collected, then brought into that experiment. Waiting in a exceedingly stressful environment, I would say. So we all know, don't we? Of course, hoof capsules grow. They do grow. And especially hoof capsules that are put out of balance on the trim that they already had when they turned up at the slaughterhouse would continue to go out of balance. Now, it is incredibly rare, I have to say, that we come across, as HMB pros, horses that are new to us that are in balance. It's really rare, and certainly never a horse that has its shoes off. And I know that, well, I don't know because I was never given this information, but I'm assuming, and you know what assume does, it makes an ass of you and me, so I better be careful there. But these horses came from the racing industry. When we were in New Zealand and our workshop last year in Christchurch, and we're going back again this year, very, very soon in March. See us there if you can. You will never regret it. As we talk about all kinds of things like this. We had horses, all the legs that Bex Nairn had supplied to us, the lovely Bex Nairn in New Zealand had supplied to us, came from the racing industry. And they all look the same pretty much in terms of the colour of the legs. They're pretty much all black. And the variability between the feet and the shoeing and the trimming was extensive. Some of them were appalling. One in particular was the most awful horse's foot that had been shod, no doubt labelled as chronic laminitic. So one would therefore assume, being in Australia, this is New Zealand and Australia, that these horses that went to the slaughterhouse probably had been shod too. Maybe they pulled them off, maybe they leave them on. I certainly know that the place that we get our legs from in the UK can't incinerate the horses with the shoes on, so they whip the shoes off. But of course, when they arrive, they're already dead because it's not a slaughterhouse. So were the shoes on? Were the shoes off? Who had trimmed them over that period of time? Over those few weeks that they were waiting, at death's door, literally. Were the feet photographed? Who trimmed them? What kind of trim did the trimmer do? Was he a farrier? We don't know the answers to these questions. So we have started the story of Chris Pollitt's laminitis way down the line. In other words, there was a whole load of stuff we should have looked at before they brought them into the experiment and they began. Because none of them started with the same perfectly balanced hoof capsule. And what was the hoof capsule like before? Even if I came along and I trimmed them and I made P3 perfectly balanced to what that horse's internal anatomy, how do I know that there hadn't been stuff going on before? How do I know that the laminae hadn't been damaged before? Let's face it, I see it every single day. Every single day, not just me, Gary, Asher, Will, all our pros go out every single day and this is what they see. Yet these horses that were in this experiment were healthy apparently, and we have no evidence of that at all. Now, you know us, we show you evidence all the time that even the tiny little pony, the little Shetland that Bethan has just has come to live with her at Galsworth, who wasn't even meant to be a rehab case. She's shown the photos online. If you go and have a look at her page, Galsworth Track Livery, you'll find it. She's shown the photos online, and the heels are super high, and the toes have been chopped off, and the coronary band is at the wrong angle. And the owner, bless the owner, was saying, I've been trying really hard with the diet and management. This pony is not overweight. They were clipping him to make sure he didn't put on weight, which is just not really the best thing you should do to a horse to try and get them to lose weight. You wouldn't do that to a human being. However, this is the advice that's given. She was doing really, really well with the diet management, but this pony still was having laminitic bouts. I mean, for us who know what's going on, it's a bit of a duh moment. Of course he was. Look at the state of his feet. That never crossed anybody's mind that the toes had been chopped, exposing the laminae to try and get that inline HPA, and the heels were left too high. And no doubt the pony wasn't having, wasn't with feet as imbalanced as that, wasn't on the regular trim cycles that it needed. So yet again, another one, and another one, and another one, and they all keep rolling in. And now we are putting them out on the Facebook page from our pros, and you're seeing the transformations of these horses. So my point is, what happened to those horses' feet before they went into the experiment? Why were we not shown sequential images of those feet? Why were we not shown sequential x-rays? And why, oh, why, when we're looking at something and coming up with a theory that we have tested in the field and proved wrong over and over and over, why, oh, why, when you're doing that, do you not also test the hind legs? Are you telling me that it's all due to weight on the front legs? That's nonsense. Have you ever seen a laminitic horse leaning on his hind feet because he can't walk on his front feet? It's nonsense, folks. The reason that you see a difference between the fronts and the hinds is simply the way they mess about with the fronts more than they do with the hinds. It's harder, and particularly on racehorses, it's harder to raise the heels on a hind. And so oftentimes they leave the toe too long. So you've got horses racing, horses competing in the Olympics with hyperpositive P3s on the front, manipulated hoof capsules, in heart bar shoes, dressage horses, compared to probably, on an awful lot of them, negative palmar angles on the hinds. I mean, what's going on? Is there any wonder these horses break down? Is there any wonder these horses get tendon issues, ligament issues? I digress. So I'm going to, because I've copied it and hopefully it'll paste, I'm going to paste the question that I posed to Chris Pollitt on Thursday. Let's see if I can do paste. I didn't paste. I copied it to my clipboard and everything. Paste. Damn it. Okay. I'm going to have to go and find it. Wait a moment. And I may end up leaving you, but I will be back. Just hold on 1 second. Okay, I'm coming back. I'm back. I'm back. Please let me post the comment. Please let me post it. Oh, yes, it's done. Okay, right. There you go. I've posted that comment. Oh, have I though? Post the comment. Oh my God. I'm just going to have to turn myself around this way while I post it. There you go. I posted it. Okay, now I can read out that comment to you. The question I posed to Chris Pollitt on Thursday. So this was the question I posed. Professor Pollitt, much of the laminitis research you've published focus on metabolic triggers, enzymatic activity, and lamellar pathology. Could you explain how, in those studies, mechanical hoof capsule changes were measured over time in live horses as part of the causation model? It's very simple. It's a very simple question. Now, I posed that question to Chris Pollitt, and it was read out to him at the end of the webinar by one of the people that was hosting the webinar. And Chris Pollitt just looked aghast. His face was startled. He looked startled. He sort of gasped a little bit and sort of stared around, searching in his mind for what am I going to say next? So there was a massive, great big pregnant pause. I mean, as I've said, if people pose you a question live, you've got to get your mind into gear. However, that question is actually a very straightforward question. What, if anything, did you use or do to measure these hoof capsules over time? In fact, were they measured at all? Were they looked at? Did you take images, x-rays, etc., of these horses you put into these experiments? And he said, well, that was a surprise. I wasn't expecting that question, kind of thing. And then he proceeded to sidestep the question completely. At the end of the webinar, once he'd left, the two people running the webinar agreed that, and there was only one question asked in that whole webinar. There were very few people on there. and it was mine. And this one question never even got answered. And the people running the webinar said, I don't think Chris Pollitt understood the question. Why didn't he understand it? This is a emeritus professor. God, it was hard to spit out. Emeritus professor at the Queensland University. Why couldn't he answer that question? Surely that would have been one of the variables that they would have wanted to check. It wasn't a difficult question. So why couldn't he answer it? He sidestepped it and then talked about horses in stables and when they've got laminitis and biomechanical issues. And he sidestepped the whole question completely. So then I was promised an email to give Chris Pollitt a bit of thinking time. A couple of days later, I was promised an email from Professor Pollitt answering my question. There was only one on the whole webinar. I mean, come on. I paid £75 for that to get my question answered by Professor Pollitt. Probably everybody would regard him to be the grandfather of metabolic dysfunctional laminitis. I didn't get it answered. So I didn't receive my email. And I paid £75. I'm a little bit put out. So I would like my answer, please. I would like to know. I've always wanted to know. 1, if you did, why didn't you publish them? 2, more likely you didn't. So why didn't you? I want to know these answers. Please. I paid good money for that. And I'd like to know. It's very rare you get the opportunity to talk to the godfather of laminitis. It's very, very rare. And I got that opportunity and I paid good money for it. And now I want my answer. Do you think I'll get it? It's my time now. It's Monday morning. So you down under, it's Monday evening. For Ash and Will, who's still in the States, and everybody in the States, it's still Sunday night. Come on, please. I'm asking you, can I have that answer? And when I get that answer, I'll talk to you guys about it. But I've got this funny feeling I'm never going to get it. That, my friends, is glaring in its omission. So we'll keep on proving the SADP theory completely incorrect. P3 is not suspended by the laminae, and we know this full well because when we rebalance the foot and put it back to its internal anatomy, what do we find? P3 stays put. Doesn't move. The only thing that moves it is when the heels creep up and you get heel creep because the poor horse has had his toes chopped off and it's going like bilio and the heels and barely anything at the toe. Why wasn't this discussed? Why haven't we got reams and reams of peer-reviewed papers looking at the mechanical problems of laminitis? We can prove it. We have now proved it. Bethan and I, X-ray after X-ray after X-ray after X-ray, and we do it every single month. Where else on the internet will you find that kind of information? Well, we take these horses in and then we X-ray them as we rebalance their feet every month. So, all of you watching, I hope when you read that question, wonder if any of you find that that's difficult for you to understand. Let's have a quick shout out. Viv Avery says, good evening to you. This is so very important. Thank you and bless you for your hard work. Thank you so much. Lindsay Dinsdale says, morning. My voice is getting better. Still a bit croaky. Karen Davies says, definitely won't regret workshops. Thank you very much. Ulrika says, hello. And then there's my question. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, no, it looks like I've pasted it 100,000 times. I don't know what I've done there. I'm sorry. Sarah says his face was just startled. Just startled. He just it was almost like, why did I? Because they had so many questions, maybe about 13 of them that had been prearranged. Now, the people, by the way, running this webinar had sent me an email just after I booked Chris Pollitt's webinar. They sent me an email, which was it was trying to control, it was risk damagement, really, risk damage. Oh God. It was trying to control it by the fact that they sent me an email, a message saying, would you like to come on a webinar? We'd like to talk to you on a webinar. And, and on this email, they said, we'd like a panel, an expert panel, which I assume that they would choose. An expert panel, and we want all pre-arranged questions. And I'm going, I don't do that when I go on a live. And so when I wrote back, I said, I don't need that. And who's choosing the expert panel? And I don't need to have pre-arranged questions. We don't do that sort of thing. Let's just do it live. Anyway, I then said to them, let me see how this webinar goes, and I'll let you know whether I want to go on a webinar with you. I don't, because in actual fact, it was run quite, well, it's not for me to say, but I paid a lot of money and I wasn't satisfied, put it that way. So, because, it's 75 quid, I could go to a concert for that, pay a good price to go to a, maybe not Lady Gaga. I'm just climbing through the woods, but, I'd have a good evening. Instead, I had 2 hours of a history lesson on the orthodoxy of laminitis written by Professor Chris Pollitt. So I don't feel like I've had my money's worth. Very deep breath. Pia says, hi, glad I found you. I wanted to hear this. Suzanne says, pink marigold hand. J. Tracy Kirk, hello. Sarah Lou says it was sidestep because it was never considered. Pollitt will know of HM and what we study. He knows the capsule was never considered. Kay Ellison, ego before truth. August. Sarah said, it's so difficult because there's this tiny little box. I think I moaned about that last time. I would like, that's if I have it on landscape, but apparently that's better. Sarah says, I would like to know in his studies how the back of P3 didn't fail at the same rate as the front. How did the cells at the back not fail also? Why was it also all about the front? Why didn't, if the laminae were just going to fail, P3 just go sink? It can't sink because it's held in place by anatomical anchors, which as an anatomist, you should know. Things like lateral cartilages. It's literally impossible for P3 to sink because those lateral cartilages are attached not just to P3, but they're attached to the coronary cushion as well, the coronary band. They have their own laminae. When you remove a hoof capsule from a horse's foot, it's not, the hoof capsule doesn't just have bone inside that it surrounds, because P3 isn't shaped like that. P3 isn't actually shaped like a full hoof capsule. So something else must be there in order for the hoof wall to attach to. And that something else is cartilage. You can scrape them off and find the cartilage underneath. So what happened there then? What's going on in that part of the foot? This is science not really doing their due diligence, maybe deliberately, missing out incredibly important variables that they're not looking at in order to fulfill a world's assumption as to what laminitis is, because they're x-raying these horses and finding P3 in the wrong position. But they're not looking at the hoof capsules. They're not doing sequential x-rays. And if they did, they would see that it's the hoof capsule that is articulating P3 around the distal interphalangeal joint, the coffin joint. And when you re-manipulate that capsule and rebalance it, P3 goes back into the right position and it stays there. Now, it couldn't possibly stay there if the SADP theory by Professor Chris Pollitt was true. If the suspensory apparatus of the distal phalanx was true, and when the lamina attachment mechanism failed, which he then says failed because of a metabolic dysfunction, it doesn't. It is being torn by imbalance. Again, so easy to prove. When that fails, and P3, the horse is horribly crippled, having a laminitic bout, they x-ray it and they see P3 in the wrong position. That vet, farrier, owner who can't, bless them, read x-rays, not, and then you find Phoenix Way, and then we teach you. They all look at that and go, oh, laminitis, P3 rotated, it's still rotating. Get it on a deep bed. Deep bed, because if you don't, it's going to sink through the capsule. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. This was a story created by people who did flawed science. This science wouldn't even pass in the medical world. They'd go, hang on a minute. You haven't looked at the hoof capsule. I mean, that's science research 101. If you've got a huge variable, like a growing glove around P3, you've got to look at that as well. But no. And this whole assumption is born on the fact, on the back of, assuming that hoof care professionals all trim correctly and all trim to the balanced internal anatomy. No, they don't. They absolutely don't. There are only very few people in the world, and they all belong to HM, who truly do trim to the horse's true anatomy. And not just that, allow a hoof capsule to heal in the way that it should. Understand that a toe wall that is wrapped around her lamellar wedge needs to be there, because the horse still needs that feedback. So to all those people out there, to all those hoof schools who think that their methods are balanced, if you are chopping off toes, if you are removing them, if you are asking that horse to walk on its lamellar wedge, not its hoof wall, as in not having the hoof wall, the pillar of supporting contact at the front of the foot, no matter how stretched that wedge, then you are interrupting that horse's natural biology and feedback. There's not a school in the world, and we know that because they all take the right royal mickey out of us, don't they? They all take the piss. And yet here we are rehabbing the, apparently, according to the laminitis research papers, the horses that are not rehabbable because they've tried. Most of these horses have had box rest, quite considerable box rest, before they turn up at GTL or before they enter into the HMB Pro Hounds. Most of them have been on ertigliflozin or metformin or some other version of a metabolic controlling drug. They've had heart bar shoes on. To support P3. I mean, come on, the ground can do that. And the soul, what are you talking about? You're just talking about mumbo jumbo nonsense. But it's got such a bloody big hold around the throat of the equine world that they're choking on laminitis incorporated. But it makes a lot of people a lot of money. And it causes an awful lot of people a lot of stress. And the money they're making is out of your pockets. All that money to pay for all of those incredible X-ray machines, MRI machines, and these vet practices, all on insurance. Where does that insurance come from? Your pocket. Who pays for the death certificate invoice that you get from the vet practice? You do. That's your money. That's not going to some charity to support laminitis. That's going in the coffers of the vet practice to pay more vets who are going to go out who don't know what a balanced hoof capsule is. And I am sorry, it sounds a bit, we're not vet bashing or pro bashing, but the point is, if you don't know, these horses are losing their lives, people. They're losing their lives because you cannot read a hoof capsule. It's shocking. bloody shocking. And unless you start to read it, understand it, if you don't know, you can come to our workshops. They're well publicised. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can come. When we were in Florida last year, at the last minute, a lovely vet called Heather flew down from New Hampshire to Florida at her own expense, of course, to come to the workshop. And she loved it. There were tears at that workshop because she stood up and said, vets are not taught this. We are not taught how to read a hoof capsule. We are not taught what true balance means. We are taught that P3 in the wrong position on an X-ray is because it's rotating, because the lamini attachment mechanism failed and P3 started to rotate in the sink. It's utterly nonsense. It's fixed by that hoof capsule, which is distorting, not because of a metabolic disease, but because of the way they have imbalanced it. It then tears the laminae. That's the distortion you see. It's bloody shocking. And I've been talking about this for bloody years. And finally, we are making ground. This is a movement of owners, not professionals. This is a movement of people going, no more. I'm not going to keep losing another horse and another pony and be told it was all my fault, or it's God's will, or they ate a little bit too much of this green stuff here. That's not what caused it. What caused it is the person who turns up every 6 weeks or less or more regularly with tools in their hands, taking off too much toe, too much sole, and leaving too much heel, putting the horse on the wrong plane. That's what caused it. I won't be quite as animated in my book, will I? It'll be calm words that you can read. I want my book to come out. I want the book to come out. It's not going to be like any other laminitis book in the world. The ones, repeating the same old narrative, the same old rhetoric. It's not going to be like any of those. It's going to be a true history of what happened to horses and why laminitis became such a thing, how it happened, what happened with the flaws in the research, and where we go from here. That's what the book's going to be about. A history book of how the world made the biggest error, the equine world, than they've ever done in the history of horses. That's what my book's about. And hopefully, with all the flights I'm doing this year, and there are many of them, to all the workshops that I am going to, all over the world this year, please come. I'll have a lot more chance to sit there and write my book, because that's where I do my writing most. When I'm up 30-odd thousand feet above all of you, writing the book. Okay, that's it. I don't know how long I've been on ranting. Oh, another 38 minutes. I was only expecting this to be a quick one. Okay, I'm going to let you go. A few last shout outs. Alison's here, Place Morgan. Morning. Meg Eccleston's here. Silence speaks louder than words sometimes. Wonder whether he'll stick with what he was saying or take it on board in the next studies. Well, he's in his early mid-80s now, isn't he? Early to mid-80s. He's an emeritus professor now. Oh, I said it better this time. And, people that are coming up behind him like Von Epps, etc., Andrew Von Epps, they've been handed the mantle. But they're just all following the same old thing, chasing the same old issues. And I tell you, world, they'll never fix it. That it's laminitis is such a terrible disease because they can't fix it, and they never will until they actually start going, oh, it was what the farrier or the trimmer did. Oops. That's very simple to fix, except nobody knows how to. Oh dear. Well, go to HM's workshops and then you'll work out how. We haven't got other Lee on here today. I'm trying to find all your comments because I want to give you a. Oh, so sorry. StreamYard, can you please make the comment section much bigger, please? Joe says 10 p.m. here in New Zealand, raining. See you in a few weeks. You will. It's just started to rain here too. Maylin's here. Hello, darling. Ulrika says your voice just scared my cat away and I got my sofa. Oh, was I loud? Sorry, I get a bit animated. Sarah Lou says very proud of our education, HMB Pro. I'm proud. You go for it, girl. You were one of the first in the Phoenix group to prove what we were saying. Pia says warrior and hero, proud. Lee Jenkins, hello again, truly. Kathy Yorkshire Lass says, money, money, money. It's not funny. It's a rich man's world. Oh, thank you, Abba. Isn't that true? So it is. Karen says, please, vets, go and see for yourselves. Go to a workshop. Please do. We do have vets come to the workshop. And when they do, like Heather, it blows their mind and changes their world. Heather, right now, who lives near Boston, is spending 2 whole, wonderful, lovely days with Asher and Will starting today when they wake up. That's progress. That's true learning. That's understanding laminitis. Max is on his 6th abscess, almost 2 years of rehab, and just goes to show how damaged he was before. Absolutely, Anne. And it is it will be for the rest of his life, a continual work to keep his feet balanced. And our love is always with you. Julie Bellini says, so right, thanks. Claire Necchi says, I've been following you for around 6 years and I'm constantly amazed at how many new people are finding your page and more importantly, saving their horses. Keep going, even if I could see it as soon as I read it. Can't understand why vets and farriers can't. We will never change the professionals. Somebody said the other day, why aren't you writing a peer-reviewed paper? Why? What's the point? Do you know how many peer-reviewed papers in both the human and the equine world go published but ignored? What the hell is the point of that? To keep the research funding money going round and round? No, I don't need to. I can just put my absolute truth on social media and on the websites that me and Bethan are bringing to you at some point. But social media is where it's at, folks. You want to see it. You're still following. Everybody's following Bethan. They know the names of these horses. You're following us. You're getting the education you need and you're changing your horses' lives. And that's what counts. And you're doing it far, far cheaper than if you were having your resections or your tenotomies or your heart bar shoes. $350 I found out in Florida for a set of 4 shoes. $350. We charge what, $70? Tut tut. Can't wait to read it, says Karen. Alison says, already booked. Marvellous. Rona says, hi, Lindsay. Hello, Rona. Jackie Berry says, hi, everyone. Sarah Lou's laughing. Karen's laughing. Meg says, so excited for the workshop. Saving up for Longmarsh. Can't wait to see you there. Lee says, Lee Jenkins says, hugs waiting for you when you get here. Thank you, thank you. Julie Parkinson says, change is coming. It so certainly is, Julie. And then hopefully we won't have horses like your mare suffering in the future. That's our goal, guys, and you're going to help me do it. Us owners are the peers doing the reviews. Was thinking about that today. You are. Anyway, I'm going to go now. I love you all. Thank you. Keep fighting the fight. Stay with us. You know the backlash we're getting. You know the crap and the bollocks that you read on social media, and they churn out they're like zombies. They churn out the same old narrative and rhetoric. Stop it, because horses are losing their lives and they're suffering and they're hurting. Like Little Whisper, who turned up 2 days ago at Gawsworth track livery, her first Shetland, and what does she find? Hideous hoof care and a horse pony has laminitic bouts. Stop it, world. We've got to sort this out. Let's do this properly. I love you all. I'm going to go. Take care. Celia says she's coming to Longmarsh. Come on. Let's do it. Take care, my lovelies. I love you all. Bye-bye. All the best. See you next time.